got to the final panel of the day. You saw a brief glimpse there of our speakers, our 1+4 that we have to finish off day 3 now. My goodness, I'm almost losing count. Day 3 of a WFS Live, which means that this will take our tally to 6 + 8 + 8, 22 of 45. So 3 days down, half of the panel is pretty much done and dusted, but plenty of amazing insights and take-homes. I'm sure you'll agree. Those of you who've been chatting on the chat function on this platform on World Football Summit, you will be absolutely concurring with that, I am sure. So our final panel of the day is a resumption of play, critical learnings from the implementation of the new normal in sport. Now, if there's something that we have realised as a result of the trouble, tumultuous last year or so that we've had, it is maybe how vulnerable we are as an industry, how maybe unprepared we were for a global pandemic, that we resisted, consolidated, innovated, pivoted, found those ad hoc solutions, got back on track is a tribute to our resilience, one of the topics we had earlier, and our ingenuity, and we just wouldn't let the virus win, and we won't let the virus win. But perhaps the most important thing is the learnings that we take going forward. What are the long-term ideas and concepts that we are now putting into play with the seasons back underway, competitions rescheduled, restructured, with fans starting to return to stadiums as well? And how does it vary sport to sport? Between the individual and the team sports, how much of a role will content allied with data have going forward? Again, how can we future-proof ourselves now, just in case another similar situation arises, which of course it could. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Lots of big questions here then in our final roundtable of the day in partnership with WSC Sports. Here are your speakers. The head of strategic business development at WSC Sports, Vadim Drozdovski, executive vice president, president team business operations at MSG Sports, David Hopkinson, also director general media and marketing services at FIBA, Frank Leenders, and senior vice president tournament administration at the PGA Tour, Andy Levinson. And to guide us through this final conversation of the day, founder and chief connections builder at the Connect. Wonderful job title. Probably the most inventive we've had all day. Raide Luis Baez. Raide, over to you.
Everyone, good morning to the folks out in the US. Let's get cracking. I mean, this has been an eventful year, to say the least. And the big question, not to look in retrospect, but the big question right now is if this crisis and the resumption of play, which created like a backlog of games and competitions throughout, has prepared us to actually be ready for the next crisis or to actually shift all of our businesses, right? And I want to start with Vadim from WSC Sports, and actually very precise in the realm of content. We saw that backlog of resumption of play has created probably a diminishing ratings result for many competitions across, but in turn a spike in digital content consumption. So from your perspective, Vadim, is that a paradigm shift that you see going steady in terms of the consumer perception that now digital content will be over TV consumption?
Okay, thanks first of all for having me, Raide, and great to see all of my other panelists here. So I think I will start by first of all saying, so personalization, first of all, your question about personalization, I would like to unpack it a little bit by understanding what's personalization really relevant for. And I think that we obviously seen the pandemic exacerbate the transition to digital, but it was an ongoing trend before that. We've all seen that, we've all read the analyses that more and more fans are consuming sports on digital, and that's where the attention is going. That's where younger audiences prefer to consume their content. So COVID has not brought anything new. It's accelerated an existing trend like it did in a lot of other cases. In my opinion, the reason personalization is really important for digital is because digital is just the nature of competition on digital for content is much different than it is for linear. Specifically, just to be completely honest, like it's a brutal every second fight for attention, and because you don't compete with parallel channels on television, or you don't even compete with the other programming, but you compete with every possible entertainment outlet on the internet. And in order to win that battle, you need to deliver really engaging, personalized content at the moment of peak emotional engagement, so when it really matters. And you need to be able to do that consistently, because it's not really enough to do it one time. You have to do it over and over again in order to keep that that loyalty of your fan base. So that's why I think that personalization is really, really key for this particular like digital enhanced era. And why I think, like, if I can expand a little bit of why I think it's important, why I think winning the battle does have a lot of positives above winning the linear battle. I think that, in my opinion at least, if you think about it, you basically convert attention to value for your organization. And in digital, you just have much more control of where you convert that value. Once you grasp the attention, you can do so much more in a so much more flexible way than you can do it with linear. For example, you can convert attention that you got on digital to meaningful engagements with sponsors or advertisers. You can convert that, to subscriptions and downloads of your owned and operated platforms, and you can even use that attention to drive tune-ins to OTT or even the same linear. But basically, you have everything you want at your disposal. So, in my opinion, it's definitely a paradigm shift in a way that it's a virtuous cycle. The organizations that would be able to do that right would capture more and more attention, would get more and more data, because the engagement on digital is so data rich, and they would be able to exploit that data to fuel back into their personalization engines, which they will be partnering with technological ecosystem partners, to then really improve even further their ability to extract that value from attention. And I just think that organizations, rights holders that won't be able to do that correctly would slowly and surely become irrelevant in that mostly digital struggle for attention.
No, definitely. Thank you, Vadim. And actually, this is more of a question for all of you. Even though you actually manage different companies and different sports properties across the globe, it is known, or at least it is said, that in order to change a habit, you only need 21 days. I mean, that's what I try going to the gym or whatever. But we are 9 months into the pandemic, and the reality is that we are now very much used to different ways of consuming content. And picking up on the personalization segue that Vadim opened, I wanted to ask David, Frank, and Andy, from your different perspectives, do you see really a permanent shift in the way our audiences and our fans actually will continue to consume your product? So, David, what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's too early to say. Vadim makes an excellent point here, right? That what the pandemic has done is accelerate a trend that was already underway. And digital engagement is critically important for every rights holder, every property, whether that's entertainment, sports, music, etc. So we're spending an awful lot more time now on digital than we ever have, because it's the only way right now that we're directly able to engage with our fans, because they're not coming to the games. We don't know when they're going to resume. The pandemic continues to rage. Are we in the second wave, the third wave? The American experience right now is 2 million new cases in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know when we're going to be welcoming fans back into our building, but I know it's not going to be until it's safe. And we don't know when that's going to be. So right now, digital is all we've got. We are thinking through, when we reopen and do so safely, what changes will be permanent. And I think there's all sorts of different changes that are permanent, but they're changes that, again, are being accelerated in this environment, right? So, if you think about our sponsorships, our partnerships, those have been increasingly digital and will continue to evolve as digital. If you think about the experience in arena, increasingly digital, increasingly touchless, increasingly utilizing your phone, whether that's ordering beers or merchandise, voting for fan of the game. Increasingly, those are in arena experiences that, again, were coming and will now be, I believe, permanent on the other side of this pandemic, whenever we arrive at the other side. But also as we work from home. I'm sitting in my home right now, and looks like most everyone here is remote, not just the panelists, but I'm sure everyone on the panel. And so some of these changes, I think, will be semi-permanent. Yes, we're going back to the office and we're going to work together there. But I also think that we're going to get used to, working this way, and perhaps even watching games this way. Virtual watch parties, which are terrific and were terrific before the pandemic, I think are a coming shift in a post-pandemic world.
Good, thank you, David. Frank, what's your take from FIBA's perspective on that?
Yeah, and I would like to echo what David says. I think what Vadim indicated, I think is also there in terms of acceleration of certain trends that were there and that are coming at us faster now, and that we will have the benefit to work with and to personalize, etc., etc. Having said that, in all reality, our priority is to be back on the court, to be able to play, to have athletes playing. And I mean, as we speak, we have our qualifiers in Kigali, Rwanda, being played without spectators. Unfortunately, we've had 3x3 back in action in Doha, and we'll now go to Saudi Arabia. We had a final 8 of the Basketball Champions League in Athens, and that's fundamentally important to be back in action, because even with the best digital tools, if there is no action, all the fantastic clips of Vadim are not that valuable either. So and I have to say also on top of that, as much as I love digital, I would like to see fans back in venues. And I know that fans want to be back in venues. And as much as I love video calls and virtual watch parties, I'm sure that we prefer to be together and drink a beer together and not look at the screen all day.
Definitely. Andy, what's your take from golf, which is a very particular sport in terms of the different tournaments that you run? What do you reckon on in terms of the content consumption?
Well, we were in a unique position in that we were one of the first sports to come back and resume operations, and we've been competing every single week since the week of June 8th. And as a matter of fact, this is the first week because of the Thanksgiving holiday in the U.S. This is the first week that we have not had at least one tournament being conducted. And so there was a period of time when we were one of the only sports to be consumed here in the United States. And we did quite well across all of our various channels. We had a lot of new fans watching our sport. And as far as digital content and developing new content concepts is concerned, those are something, as David said, that we were already developing prior to the pandemic, and will continue to do so. For us, our television windows very often are just a fraction of the competition that's being conducted throughout the day. And so finding ways to engage with our fans and let our fans participate in that competition throughout the day is really a critical focus of ours. We want to be at the point where every week fans will be able to see not just the shot that's being hit and shown on television, but every single shot. We have, on an average, we have 144 players in a field, maybe 72 players playing at one time. That's but yet you can only show one shot on television. We would like to get to the point where we have personalized video feeds of every single shot. And so people can watch their favorite players, they can watch the action on a particular hole and so forth. And as it ties into the developing sports betting industry here in the United States and really the interest in our sport from that perspective around the world, developing this critical content is also very, very important. So we were in a fortunate position early there in the summer in June and part of July when we were the only show on TV, and we engaged new fans, and it's up to us to find new ways to engage with them going forward.
No, definitely, and I must tell you that whenever golf makes, the opening headline of the news telecast, that that's means that something happened. And with John Rahm's shot a couple of weeks ago, at least here in Spain, as you can imagine, everything, everyone was a golfer. So moving along, actually, and centering in the three different properties that you guys represent. And probably Vadim will spare us with that and his knowledge of other properties as well. For example, in the case of David, you actually come from Real Madrid now, going to MSG, to the world's most famous arena, and hosting two of the most recognizable franchises in the US scene. Frank, from FIBA's perspective, the governing body of basketball, and you have two very distinct tentpole events, even though you actually covered the full pyramid, but you have the World Cups and definitely the Olympics, which it's something that is to be seen next year, how that will unfold. And in your case, Andy, you manage from PA 130 golf events, which across the US, Canada, Latin America, and China. I mean, I'll be remiss if I don't ask, what is, after all of this that has happened, what is your most immediate and also towards the mid-long-term impact that the pandemic has had in terms of the adjustments from your operations in terms of business? What is something that we could expect to be run differently than before out of this pandemic situation? Andy, if you want, take it.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, we were able to come back early, and that was really because we had some built-in advantages with our sport being played outdoors across hundreds of acres in a manner where everybody could be physically distant and so forth. But we also took a number of steps to create a healthy and safe environment, limiting the number of people on property that were just required to operate the event, set spectators aside. So limiting that number significantly, creating a complex system of screening and testing and so forth, establishing charter flights in between events, all of that came at a very, very significant cost. And so that will have an impact on our business for some time. But the greatest impact has been our inability to host spectators. We've done it on a very limited basis at a couple of tournaments, but without spectators, our product just isn't the same. And I think that could be said for every sport. Our tournaments, many of which are operated independently, lost a significant amount of revenue. We have to find new ways to deliver value to our sponsors. And we have different sponsors each week. And so, that's a great challenge for us to show our sponsors different ways that they can engage with us. And then the PGA Tour, at its foundation, is designed to drive money to charities. And so almost every one of our tournaments distributes its net proceeds to charitable organizations. And so a number of worthy causes have been significantly impacted by that. And so our focus right now, first and foremost, is to maintain a safe and healthy environment. But beyond that, we have to find a way to bring our fans back to the events. And that's our real focus right now. In the immediate and near-term future, we have to develop ways that we can bring fans back in a responsible manner, so that not only Can they experience the events? But all those other things, driving revenue for our tournaments and for our organization, driving charitable dollars, and continuing that personal engagement that we always have with our corporate sponsors and their clients as well. So that is entirely our focus right now.
All right, Frank, what's ahead for global basketball, and especially with the big elephant in the room, the Olympics next year? Sorry, Frank, I think we cannot hear.
That's difficult. Now, as I try to say, we are all dealing with short, middle, and long-term issues. And in the short term, it is about being able to play in these bubbles, because we are playing in bubbles with COVID-19 protocols, etc., etc. And we need to get teams in safe, as Andy said, we need to take care of the safety of athletes and all the people involved, and try to stay on the court. The middle term, I would say, is hopefully is the first part of 2021. It is the period to get out of this COVID tunnel, and the uncertainty that comes with that. And the uncertainty relates, Raide, as you say, also to the calendar. And we had a change of the Tokyo Olympics from 2020 to 2021. That has a whole lot of knock-on effects on the rest of the calendar. We managed, fingers crossed, to deal with that. But now we have to see if that calendar can be delivered, and can be implemented with all the consequences that it has. And then, we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, on the panel. Then you have the longer term situation to say, how can you deal with such situations in the future? I mean, hopefully and probably it will not be immediately another pandemic, but there will be potentially some other black swan incident down the road, and how can you try to be prepared for that?
Yeah, definitely. David, what's your take now? I know that you are into a very new role, but
Yes.
you kind of lead that transition right from the previous role to this one in the middle of the pandemic. So what's your take on that?
I think Andy and Frank have said it really well, right? Andy's got it exactly right. We are just not the same without our fans. The sport is wonderful. It's great on television. It's great digital. It's just not the same, and it's just not as good without our fans. So we need to do everything we can as quickly as we can to get our fans back into our buildings and to our games. But of course, it's not directly in our hands either, right? This is a globally disruptive event. So I don't know. What do you take? What do I take from this? I guess I take that the business environment that we had previously was maybe being taken for granted. If we think back to after 9/11 in New York and in North America and around the world, and terror was introduced in a major way. I remember doing tabletop exercises for years afterwards, thinking about how we would respond to if we ever had to deal with something as grave and as devastating to business as a terror attack, either at our building or elsewhere in our league. And those exercises were helpful. I think we've got to think about now, and no one saw the global pandemic coming. Well, maybe Bill Gates did, but I guess not enough people saw that TED Talk or responded to that TED Talk. I think the next time someone said, listen, what if we ever took a year off? What if we ever lost our fans for a year or two? Well, that person might have been laughed at a year ago, but I don't think they'll be laughed at in the future. So I do think that there is an incumbency in our business, like every business, to remain flexible, nimble, agile, and able to respond quickly to, as Frank said, a future black swan event. If we think back to April in our business was mostly characterized by we were frozen. we didn't know what to do. I mean, remember this is at first, masks don't work. Don't worry about masks. And then it became, listen, this is going to be over in 2 weeks. And here we are 9 months later, and the pandemic is, as I said previously, it's not over, it's raging. So, we have got to learn from this experience that there is some value in remaining nimble and remaining flexible. And I hope next time, whatever it is, we don't freeze for quite as long as we froze this time. We lost a lot of time in March and April thinking this would be over in 2 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Vadim, a quick one for you on the back of that. What are your clients? You have a very wide client base across the globe, right, in the sports industry. What are your clients asking you now that they weren't asking you before the pandemic in terms of service, delivery, or features, or things like that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess everybody pretty much touched on the main things that were felt like they were lacking, and this is basically what we first of all understood quite early, that these are going to be the things that we're going to be asked of, and I think that in that case it couldn't be that wrong, because we saw the overdependence on live sports across the industry, because obviously when you have that magical product of live sports and the engagement and the emotion it generates, it's really hard not to over-index on that. And then obviously when pandemic hit and we kind of woken up to this new reality of what we do without it, a lot of the clients came in and said, what can we do when we don't have that? And the obvious answer was, okay, so we have a lot of content of live sports that when we did play it once, what can we do with that? And then we started understanding that nobody really understands what they have in their archive or how to really utilize it in a meaningful way to keep that emotional engagement going with the spectators. So we started developing tools and started developing real products that would help bring this archival content alive in meaningful ways. First of all, analyzing it really quickly, having your 20 past seasons searchable, and understand exactly when the specific event happened, that you really want to utilize it tomorrow because that's the day it happened, right? So all of this stuff that kind of remind people of a past that was kind of sweeter and nicer, a little bit of nostalgic approach, but also I think was really, really necessary at the time of fans really craving for that experience that they had with live content. So that was the first reaction. I think after sports started to return, a lot of the requests were about, okay, so we can't have a lot of people, in the production. We can't have a lot of our digital teams working together. How can we make things even more efficient? Having everybody creating content automatically. How can we help, even our broadcast partners do their production, of highlights in a more automated way? And all of these things were kind of, they were not eye-openers because we understood that that's where we're supposed to be going. But I think that it was very obvious that the pandemic really created this hole that needed to be filled. And I think we made big improvements at that particular moment of how we see the production of future event coming live even after fans return. So I think that was the second wave of response that we adapted to WC.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Vadim. Now we are approaching clutch time to make it basketball. I know Frank likes that. And now I wanted to throw the last question to go around. And actually, we talk about the ability to not freeze and the ability to act quicker and adapt and be nimble. At the beginning, David introduced us, and actually, this was one of the features of the sports industry, the resiliency. I mean, we came out in any shape or form we could to play and to finish seasons and things like that, the ones that could. We launch a poll to our audience, asking them a very specific question in terms of, is the sports industry now better prepared for the next major crisis? We were thinking about, just talking about the potentials of the next Black Swan event. But I wanted to know what answer would you give to that question? Are we prepared to the next major crisis? Yes or no, and why? Andy, if you want to start.
Well, I don't know that any of us had a global pandemic crisis plan before all this started. We have one now, so we're prepared for that. I'm not sure that we would have done anything differently, though. I mean, there was no roadmap for exactly how we were going to return from a pandemic. But we did learn a lot in our adaptability. We developed a plan that was easily adaptable, and we have made changes throughout. And that goes for content as well. We need to be prepared to offer content in the event of some other catastrophic situation, that we can continue to engage with our consumers. Some of the things that we did as a sport were really innovative. We had 2-on-2 competitions when most of the country here in the U.S. was shut down. Golf was still a sport that could be played in many states, and so we took advantage of that. We had small 2-on-2 competitions. We used a limited number of production resources, just a few cameras, and everything else was produced and directed remotely. And that was something that hadn't really been done in our sport before. Those are the types of things that we need to have ready in the event of any other type of situation like this going forward. Again, there was no roadmap for what we were doing. But again, as you've all said, you have to stay nimble. You have to be prepared to adapt. And in the event that something like this does happen again, be ready with resources to address it.
Definitely. Frank, what's your take?
Yes, I think a lot of people now will have a pandemic plan, and probably and hopefully they will not need it, and there will be need for another plan for something that was not foreseen. That's a typical reaction. I think there are some reactions that we will see now, and with regards to insurance policies, cancellation policies, force majeure clauses in contracts. Those are the typical reactions that come now. Everybody's looking now at those topics for sure. I think more generally, people will definitely look more about having more reserves to be prepared for that. And I think in the business plan, also to look at, have more diversification, to be less dependent, to be more in control if possible. And I agree with Andy also on the content side, to be better prepared to move, and that probably connects also to Vadim. I mean, a lot of people said, yeah, we have this project on the archive, let's do it. Now you need it, and then it is not really in the right way, or it's not really ready at that moment, you realize, or and I think a lot of people realize they're very, very, very reliant on the live content alone, and to and a lot of people, and I think most people that are honest about it, they all said we were great. We had an archive plan and old games and classic games and so on, and we opened our archive to our rights holders. Yes, good things, but it's still probably most of the time too little, too late.
Yeah. So what's it, David? Are we ready, or we need more learnings?
Yeah, I'm just thinking. I'd like to answer that question a year from now. I'd like to answer that at the World Football Summit in 2021. We have not learned all the lessons yet from this experience. So we're just getting at MSG. With respect to the NBA, we're just getting ready to play. We're going to play a game in less than a month. We're going to have a regular season that opens December 22nd. We're expecting an announcement from the NHL soon. Those leagues, we learned a lot from the experience in the bubbles. That's a very successful bubble in Orlando with the NBA, successful bubbles in the NHL located in Toronto and in Edmonton. We learned a lot in those experiences that we're about to apply in home arenas across North America. We're going to learn an awful lot in each one of those arenas and from one another with what's working. I was on a 2-hour call yesterday, talking with the NBA organized with 6 different providers of screening technology, testing technology, reporting technology to, as we share learnings. So I think we're in the middle of this, and it's too early for me to say, here's what I know for sure. What I do know for sure is we'll be a lot smarter a year from now.
Definitely. David, welcome back.
David, you were referring to there, but yes, no, that's absolutely fine. Are we going to hear from Vadim finally on this last question? Do you want to chime in, Vadim, just on learnings going forward? Very, very briefly, any thoughts just to round off the discussion?
Sure. So why don't I end with something optimistic? I think that at the end of the day, this thing we were experiencing and like accelerated by the pandemic, obviously this transition to digital, we're all kind of, we're hurting right now, not because of the transition to digital, we're hurting because there's no play, and it's not, sports without spectators, not really sports, and everybody is kind of, feeling the pressure because this is not our product. This is not what we deliver to fans at the end of the day, and we want that to be over. But I think at the end of the day, once it's over, and once we transition to, business as usual, but like with digitally enhanced products, what I think is going to happen that we will have earned the ability to turn our quite commoditized product that we had before into something much more customized, much more, specific to a bunch of different peoples in a bunch of different situations. And I think at the end of the day, that's where you extract the value. You extract value and with meaningful engagements. And I think we really had to learn this the hard way right now, but it will really come back bearing fruits once we come back to normal. At the end of the day, I think I really see a lot of positives that will emerge from that. So I'm optimistic there.
Fantastic. Thank you for those closing thoughts. Raida, thank you very much for guiding the conversation. I think there were some excellent talking points there and some real positive things to take forward, not just what Vadim has just said, but about that adaptability. Yes, the customization, the personalization. I think we're going to see that particularly with content going forward, and media companies, broadcasters, OTTs are certainly having that as a focus going forward. Yes, maybe there's a note of caution, some cautionary things we need to think about. We haven't learned all the lessons yet. Maybe we're going to be a little bit more cautious in terms of having more reserves. We'll try and reduce the dependency, having more diversification just in case something like this happens again. And David Hopkinson saying about being flexible, also agile, able to respond quickly and not freezing. Yeah, all really useful take homes for our audience. So thank you very much indeed, guys, for closing off this final panel of the day on day 3 of WFS Live. Thank you ever so much. Really do appreciate your input today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys, we're coming towards the end of another content-filled and insightful day. We are aware of a story which has broken in the last hour or so, and we would like to mark it here at WFS Live. Unfortunately, we have some tragic news to bring you, which is that we have lost arguably the most gifted footballer of a generation, without doubt, one of the most entertaining and talented footballers to ever grace the pitch. Diego Armando Maradona has died. He has passed away at the age of 60. He suffered a cardiac arrest at his home. A World Cup winner, of course, in 1986. He won 2 Serie A titles with Napoli in Italy. He represented Barcelona and Sevilla as well. And of course, he did coach the national side in Argentina for a couple of years too. Argentina as a country will be observing 3 days of mourning. We felt it was apt and right of us to mark this moment as well. Our thoughts and prayers are with Diego Armando Maradona's friends and family. I'm sorry that it's a somber note on which to end a day 3 as a virtual event, but we will be back tomorrow with 10 more panels as we continue with day 4 of WFSL Live.